Yeah, so yeah, just on behalf of the Bill Nelems Pain and Research Center, thanks so much for joining us and agreeing to do this webinar. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if patients want to put things in the chat box, Madeline will take a look at those and then send out the video at the end of the evening. But just a warm welcome, and yeah, I just ask that everybody is kind and respectful in their comments, and that's usually always what happens, but just got to say that. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the reminder to record. See, I know myself, and I know that I try not to like record all the the chat in the beginning. And thanks for the reminder. So yeah, so tonight we have with us again Dr. Andrea Moore, and Andrea is a doctor of physical therapy. She's a board certified orthopedic specialist, a functional nutrition therapy practitioner, and a certified life. And I find that the topics that Dr. Moore talks about are not often talked about, but are so relevant to so many people who live with persistent pain. And yeah, she has a huge knowledge base, and but not only that, she also has her own lived experience of chronic pain and her own story. And often these are the places where we find out through our own life experience some really valuable teachings. So yeah, tonight we're going to talk about break the cycle of chronic pain, and I'm really curious about from shrink to power, which sounds really exciting. So thanks for being here, Andrea, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've always had such a great time coming to these webinars, so it's an honor to be back. And it's always been such a great group. So please, if there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Although if I don't see them as I'm going through, feel free to copy and paste them at the end as well. And really, I'm just really excited to bring you this training because today is going to really help you get crystal clear on what creates this cycle of chronic pain. And we'll go into a little bit more about what that cycle is, even in the first place. But then, of course, most importantly, how to break it, because that's what we all really care about, right? And I always like to start a little bit with my philosophy because I'm not about any approach that makes people feel like they need to be perfectly following some exact rigid outline or any protocol or any approach that feels like it dims your light or it takes away from who you are as a person, or any approach that leaves you feeling hopeless or, ashamed or any of that. But I'm also not about an approach that promises some quick fix or, hey, just do this perfectly, XYZ, or take this pill or supplement, and your pain's going to magically disappear overnight. Because as we know with chronic pain, it's just not the case. And I find often we can get stuck in perfectionism, which is what I did a webinar about. I think last time I was here, or the first time, I can't remember which one. So you can always go back to that one, but there's a lot of overlaps between perfectionism and chronic pain. So we want to make sure we are aware anytime that perfectionism is showing its face. But what I'm really into is helping people finally feel like themselves. Maybe for the first time in their lives, or maybe knowing what it has felt like pre-pain and helping them refine that and really getting to live a life full out in whatever that means for you. Because the reality is, everyone is here on this earth to live a life experience that's unique for you. So this gets to be what is right for you, because at its essence, this work is always guided by you, your life, and your values. And you get to vet everything I say through your lived experience and what you know is right for you. Because while I'm here to help guide you and provide, what has worked for me and what has worked for my clients, ultimately it is up to you to bring in your authentic wisdom and make aligned, empowered decisions that are right for you, and to stand powerfully in your light, in your true self, even if sometimes that's the thing that can feel a little scary for our nervous system. So ultimately, again, it's really going to be about how can you use these things that I'm teaching you tonight to take all these tools and put your own twist on them. And okay, wait, I just see a comment of full video. Can you guys see me at all? Or I just wanted to check in because I can't see myself. So I just wanted to
I
let me
can
know.
see you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just check. Can other
Okay.
people
I
see? If
just,
you can't see us,
okay.
good. Yeah,
Okay,
you
cool.
can change it to gallery view so you can see the slide and our face, our two faces anyway. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Because normally I can see myself and I can't on here, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So, this does take work and focus and intention. I'm not, again, going to pretend it's some quick fix. However, putting in that effort and really putting in that attention is exactly what liberates you from the cycle of pain, by getting to the root of pain and addressing that. So, if you're here today, you're someone whom I already know is courageous, open, and committed to healing. You wouldn't be here otherwise. So whether you are here live or you're watching the replay later, I really want you to feel that just showing up for yourself to these webinars already tells me so much about you, and that there's a part of you that knows that you are meant for more than just managing your pain and just getting by. And so you're willing to keep exploring your own body, learning more about yourself, and move out of an approach that isn't working. And so by the end of today, you're really going to be able to identify when you're approaching your pain in a way that might be actually unintentionally amplifying, because obviously we never mean to amplify our own pain, which we're going to learn about. That's the shrink response, and you'll learn all about that later. And so you can save yourself a lot of, headache, both literally and figuratively, and time when approaching your pain that doesn't work to your body. And instead, you're going to learn how to shift into the power response. And so to ensure you get the most out of this, I really want to emphasize that this training is not just passive. It's not where you consume the information and then, never revisit it again. It's really something that you get to take in and then apply to your life, and really take what really resonates with you and then take it into your days, into your weeks, and really shift the way you are responding to your pain. Because ultimately taking action on, this information you're getting is what makes the difference, not just the information alone. As we all know, we could read books about how to ride a bike all day long. You could, be an expert in how a bike works, but ultimately until you actually get on it and take that messy, imperfect action and are willing to fall on your face a bit and just try things out, you'll never actually know how to ride a bike. So my approach is always about taking messy action with discomfort, with uncertainty, because it is that can heal pain. And not waiting for the perfect plan or knowing every piece of information or waiting for some perfect moment in your life for everything to calm down and, I'll wait until this is all in order, or I finish this project, because we all know there's always something that pops up, right? Right when we think things have settled, something's going to pop up. And actually, even in the impossible scenario that life finally feels all settled, it's actually one of the worst times to implement a new habit or plan, because we know things are going to get busy again, or that you have a flare up, or it rains, or a child gets sick. And when we implement something kind of in the state of perfection, what happens, it's the first thing then that will fall off when things go awry. So it's actually better to train your brain to implement new things with kind of that messy, tiny little bite-sized pieces, little by little, in the reality of life, because that helps your brain know that healing can happen at any time, not just when things are perfectly lined up. All right. So to make the most of your time, what's really gonna help you absorb this information is actually about holding some tension of a paradox of what I just said, because I was just talking all about action, right? However, the best way to be able to take that action later on this week is to use what you learn here is to actually soften right now. So go ahead, and if you're holding any tension in your body, or if you're like, oh, I'm going to get the answer to, cure my pain right now, allow yourself to just shake it off a bit. You've signed up, you've showed up, you've already done the hardest part right now. So you get to just relax and take it in. Because we can actually take in information, and it can really just become more embodied in our nervous system when we're softened and relaxed, and not when we're feeling kind of like, rigid and tense about needing to get it all down. This is recorded, there's a replay. And also I promise you that, again, you don't need to remember everything perfectly. There will be no pop quizzes. And just when you can soften and you can allow your body to take in the information, you'll naturally be able to bring it into life. So if you can just make yourself 2% more comfortable, maybe even grabbing some water, closing down any tabs, putting away distractions, letting go of any perfectionistic expectations, because there's no right or wrong way to do this or to even respond to this information. And also feel free to share in the chat when something is resonating with you, or when something feels, maybe a little tensioned in your system, because when you're willing to share and get vulnerable, there is a group healing effect when people know that they are not alone in what they are thinking or feeling. All right, so what to expect from today? What you can expect is how to move from the shrink to power response. And that's really going to be breaking the cycle of pain. And when we can do that, pain is going to lessen because it no longer needs to scream so loud at you. Often those endless racing thoughts when you're fearing re-injury or how you're going to care for yourself or your kids is going to dissipate. Your time gets freed up, because we spend so much time thinking about our pain, Googling our pain, learning about our pain. And obviously there's time spent, helpful learning about our pain, but there's a lot of time that we spend in that kind of spiraling, right? And you also can get back to the things that you love doing, and most importantly, getting back to life on your terms. So thank you for the introduction already. In case you didn't catch that, I'm Dr. Andrea Moore. I'm founder of the Whole Self Integration Method, host of the Unweaving Chronic Pain podcast. And I have worked with everyone from nurses and full-time moms to multi-million-dollar top of the industry coaches and spiritual healers to professional performers and athletes. Over the last 12 years, I've helped thousands of people alleviate pain, access more capacity and energy, and step into their personal power so that they can achieve their goals in life, whether it is their business goals, relationship goals, or just goals that they have with themselves or their families. One of the things that puts this approach that I come at above the rest is because it really integrates in so many different components, and it is a commitment to really meeting each client where they are. And it's a fully holistic approach. And it's always about ensuring that the success is measured and achieved according to your values, your mission, and your aligned, and what feels aligned for you and how your nervous system and body best respond. Now, I never like to waste any time diving into my personal story on webinars, so feel free to visit my website after or listen to my podcast, or I am an open book. If you ever want to know more about my personal story or about my approach or anything, feel free to reach out. But what I do want you to know Like mentioned, I have experienced chronic pain myself and post-concussive syndrome, which actually put me out of work for 6 months after a bad car accident. But I've also been professionally working with chronic pain for over a decade, and I have knowledge from the conventional world, from physical therapy, and I've trained extensively in trauma-informed approaches, somatic work, and all different multitude of approaches because I was looking for the one that worked for me and also my clients. So to me, everything I've learned has really helped me see the whole human and the whole picture. So go ahead and let me know in the chat if you relate to any of these things. Do you ever wake up having no idea what you're going to be able to do that day or how you will feel? Do you ever live in fear of flaring up your pain or re-injuring yourself? Do you feel like you can no longer exercise or move how you'd like to? Maybe your pain is negatively affecting your relationships, your career, your hobbies, and it just feels like life is shrinking. Already seeing lots of yeses, and I just want to hold so much space and love and compassion. Nothing to be guilty of. And you've been told maybe that the pain is in your head and to just live your life. And, or maybe you are scared that moving, or that you've been told that moving in a certain way will create re-injury. So all of the above. Flare-ups are worthy. Yeah, yes, yes. And just to know that you are not alone, like Madeline was saying at the beginning, you are not alone in this. And sometimes I think it can be helpful to remember that, like you, there are so many on this earth right now that are experiencing this as well. And we are even all connected through that. And I know it can be really frustrating to be in that state. And so just extending lots of love, compassion, and also hope, because you're here, you're already doing one of the most important things, which is showing up for yourself. So our bodies cannot heal when we see them as something to be feared or fixed. There's a reason that the most famous healers will all speak about love and compassion and acceptance of ourselves. The Buddha said our wounds are healed only when we touch them with compassion. Notice he wasn't saying just shove everything that's imperfect about yourself deep down and completely hide it from the outer world, right? Or perfect yourself so ultimately so you never make another mistake and you are, this ultimate perfection of a human, right? That's not what this is about, because we're human. We're all human. But yet so many of us unintentionally do this or treat pain like this, where we feel like we have to completely fix ourselves, or we kind of have to figure out how to hide it. And this will put us in fear of our own bodies. And so often we are trying to heal ourselves through this lens of needing to achieve this perfection. Again, whether that's from a physical standpoint, a functional standpoint, or even an emotional standpoint. Or maybe it's about how the world views you, or, how you view yourself. And versus viewing healing as something that is supportive and loving for our individual unique bodies and selves, that it's a way to care for ourselves, to come in harmony with ourselves, to actually just, again, care for and provide this body that we are living in with what it needs. Because the truth is, as long as the energy behind the desire to heal is because you just want your pain gone, which, don't get me wrong, I know that we all obviously don't want pain here. No one's like, yay, I want pain. Don't worry, you don't have to be like that. But if all the energy is like, I need this gone, I need this gone, it tells your body that it's wrong for having pain, and it puts us at a tension with ourselves. And we'll go more into that. So continuing to fight your body while trying to heal will lead to increased nervous system sensitization, which leads to more pain. And I know I think most of you are familiar with nervous system sensitization. So we're not going to go into the neuroscience here. I know you guys have some amazing resources available to you if that is a newer concept or something you want to brush up on. I'm sure Madeline can direct you to the right webinar on that. So I am going to operate from the assumption that You're all familiar with nervous system sensitization, because chronic pain, no matter what, is sticking around because of this. And the longer pain is present, the more the sensitization process does occur. And I'm glad this resonates, David. Thank you. And so with that, what I first want to differentiate a little bit between is pain and suffering, because I think this is a really important concept, and to separate the two out. So first, let's talk about that before we dive into the shrink versus power responses, which I know you all want to hear about. But there's a famous parable, and it goes a little bit like this. Maybe you've heard it. You're walking in the woods, and suddenly you get struck by an arrow. I don't know who's firing an arrow at you, but so it is. And it hits your arm, and it really hurts, obviously. You feel that physical pain, it's bleeding, there's a wound. And you immediately start to think, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? What if I bleed to death? What if this is infected? What if I can't get help? What's going to happen to my family? Who's going to take care of my kids? You know, you start spiraling down. So the Buddha described the first arrow as the physical pain. The physical pain is the first arrow. But what your mind does with it, when it starts thinking about the worst case scenario, having a lot of intense emotions about it, catastrophizing, even blaming yourself of like, oh, why didn't I see this coming? That is the second arrow. And as the Buddha says, be warned of the second arrow, because the first one is the pain, but the second arrow is suffering. And when we can distinguish between pain and suffering, it can actually alleviate not only just suffering, but ironically, it also will bring down pain as well. Here's the thing. Pain is something that is inevitable when we live a human life. When we live a human experience, we are going to have pain. None of us is getting out of this world alive or without pain. But we can really mitigate the suffering that happens. And the cool thing is when we understand neuroscience and nervous system sensitization, and we'll get into it a little bit more when we start looking at the cycle, you'll see that actually minimizing the suffering with chronic pain often actually will minimize the pain itself as well. And let's be real, no one means to create suffering in their life. Often it's at this really deep unconscious level, and most will never realize it, but you have showed up here today, which means you get to start seeing it for yourself. And the reason that none of us tend to realize it unless it's pointed out is because often a lot of the suffering is actually taught to us by culture, by society, by our families, often not even on purpose. And it can look different for different people. And one of the biggest telltale signs that there's some degree of suffering at pain or at play is when we have the should statements, oh, I should be better already, or oh, I should have done this, or I should be implementing this. You can feel that just like makes your body tense up. Anything that makes you feel stifled, limited, or even shrinking likely is a degree of, has a component of suffering to it. Anything that's cutting you off from your desires, your dreams, and your values. And so often we really try to force a one size fits all approach, or maybe we're trying to use techniques on our suffering that are actually more applicable to pain. So we will jam up. Things won't quite be having the benefit that we are expecting. And so this can help differentiating the two to really help you know what might be best for what you are experiencing in that moment. And I want to say that even an acute injury, like, if someone goes and sprains their ankle, will absolutely be amplified when you add that second arrow on top of it. So with that, let's move into what makes up the components of the cycle of chronic pain. Because when you can master breaking the cycle of pain, you can fully step into your whole self, and really start to feel that expansiveness where you have that ability to wake up and really feel like you get to decide what you want for your day and do that without feeling like the ball of chain is holding you back. You finally get to live your life instead of spending all your free time and energy just managing pain or trying to fix yourself. And yeah, Ina says, interesting, I'm focusing on the pain mostly, not the suffering. Yeah, it's such a shift. And I find focusing on the suffering component when that is there is it's like it's more bang for your buck. And you'll understand why soon, but feel free to ask more about that. But it will, the side effect will be to affect the pain. Oops, hold on. Okay. So the vicious cycle of pain. Now, this cycle here is something that we all are going to experience at some point in life, okay? Again, we are humans here, life happens, we're going to get in the cycle. Old habits die hard. And what the research shows us is that neurons that fire together, wire together. And you may have already heard this phrase before, but it means that whatever you have been doing is really what's also wired into your system. It just becomes habit. And the loops that our brain chooses to wire in have absolutely nothing to do if they help you or aid in your thriving or aid in your suffering. It's just what is used most. It's like the rut that the wheelbarrow will develop over time. It doesn't matter if it's the best path or a terrible path, right? It's just the worn path. And so having some compassion with yourself or understanding that a lot of times we bring in these neural pathways unintentionally just because we've been doing the same response over and over. But the way to break that is what I'm going to show you. But to break it, we first have to be aware of what it is to break, right? So in this vicious cycle of pain, we start with pain. All right, we're going to keep it pretty broad level here since everyone is probably coming here with a different type of pain. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if you are here on a chronic pain webinar, this applies to you. And so we have this pain, and anytime pain is present, we're going to have a reaction to it, right? We respond to it. That's a natural human thing. And when it is this shrink response that you will be learning about what it is, what this does, the shrink response actually kicks us into increased nervous system sensitivity. And if you've been hanging around probably in this group, you know that will only lead to more pain, but I'm also putting it also will lead to more suffering as well. Now, why does this happen? Here's the thing, the number one thing that creates increased sensitization is the nervous system interpreting more threat than safety. Now, here's the kicker. Threat is extremely subjective. And when it comes to pain, it's especially subjective. And so when we have the shrink response, it signals to the brain that pain is a threat. And therefore, the brain's response and the body's physiological response is going to be to ramp up sensitization because it's like there's a threat present. This shrink response tells the body there's a threat. And one of my favorite studies, I don't know if you all have heard this one before, but bear with me if you have, that really illustrates the subjectivity of pain is one that is on a demolition derby crash car drivers. Basically, I don't exactly know what they are, but people who crash their car into each other for fun is what I gather. So these demolition derby drivers average in their career, about 30 events that they go to. And per event, there's an average of 48 crashes per event. Okay, that's a lot of crashes in one night. Over 50% of those are rear end collisions. That means in their career, they're going to experience about 1,400 crashes. It's a lot of crashes. When they survey this population, only about 7% have chronic neck pain, which for most of them was mild. However, when you look at the general population, The studies vary pretty wildly, but they show that up to 50% of people end up with chronic neck pain after just one accident, often at speeds that are much slower than the 1400 crashes these demolition drivers are exposed to. Why? Because those drivers, the general public, right, if we're out just driving our cars, are often pretty much always going to respond with the shrink response. Again, unintentionally. It's kind of the natural human response, which creates more sensitivity and amplifies the threat response and ends up in chronic neck pain. However, the derby drivers, they're having fun. They, again, unconsciously are having a power response. And so that becomes the huge differentiating factor, because if it was just the collision in itself, then there wouldn't be a difference. I mean, I don't think demolition drivers would even be a sport because they wouldn't be able to do that, right? And so what we can really know is how the body interprets what's happening to it is so important. And don't worry, yeah, Kim, we will get into the shrink response in a minute here. I just want everyone to be able to see where it falls into the vicious cycle. I will break it down, but also helmets. Well, a helmet isn't going to really impact. I mean, it's a good point, fair point. And I actually have no idea if they wear helmets. I'd imagine they do. A helmet doesn't really impact like that, the whiplash though of that. And so yeah, they expect the crash. I mean, these are all like, I love where you guys are going with this. There's actually research that show that in the general population, that when people see a crash coming, they're actually more likely to have neck pain though, because they stiffen up, which sounds really counterintuitive, but actually seeing a crash in the general population is more indicative of pain. I mean, again, every crash is going to be different, but no, I love where you guys' brains are going. This is great. So as you have probably noticed, there's probably some points in your life where you've kind of fallen into this, and you'll be able to see it, more once we learn about what the shrink response is. So unlike though this being, a 2D spiral or a 2D circle here, the truth is the cycle of pain, I call it the vicious cycle of pain, is because it's not just like we spiral around. It kind of gets worse as things go on. The longer we're in it, the more our pain increases, the more suffering increases, and often the less movement and function we have access to. And so that's why it's so important to break this cycle. So the shrink response, what is it? Because I want to know. And so as we go through it, I want to invite, if it feels okay to do this, is to actually embody the shrink response as I'm painting this picture through it step by step of what happens. And I'll invite you to just feel like put yourself in the shoes of somebody going through this response. So as you kind of settle into that, we're just going to go with what day it is today. It's Monday. So the week has just started. It's only Monday, but the week, well, we're going to pretend, hopefully this is not the case for anybody, has just not been going as it's been expected. It's already, just been a bad day. Maybe you had the Sunday out a few weeks ago where your pipe burst in your house and there was a waterfall coming out of your ceiling. That's how the week started. Oh, an acronym. Yeah, good. I love acronyms too. Hence the reason for this. Thank you. So your week is just already going to crap. And you have dinner with friends that you actually are looking forward to. Like you kind of started the week with this excitement of like, I have this event that is going to be really fun. It's like dinner and a show. And that's on Wednesday night. But you're like, oh my gosh, this week is really busy. Here's all these things already happening, already piling up. And just as you're like, okay, nevertheless, I'm going to bang these things out because I'm determined to, be able to go to this dinner and the show. But then all of a sudden, you feel this all too familiar pain flare set in. You thought you were having a good pain week despite all the other stuff, but it came in here, it got you. So you start spiraling. This is the S, the first step of shrink response that happens. Your mind jumps to worst case scenarios. You're like, I'm going to have to cancel dinner. There's no way I'm going to be able to sit through that show. oh my goodness, they're going to be so upset that I'm canceling on them again. Like, you just start going through that spiral. And which then is going to enter you right into the H, which is the harsh inner critic. That sets in next. You start being like, oh, why didn't I rest more? Why didn't I do more last week so I didn't have many things going on? Why didn't I notice the signs that this was going to happen? Why did I schedule so much? Why did I even agree to this dinner? I know that I'm never able to do these things. What did I do wrong? Why can't I just make it through 1 week while feeling like a normal person, right? We beat ourselves up. Not a fun experience. Which then leads right into the R, which can stand for mainly three things. Usually we're going to have one of these three responses, although you can have a mix of all of them. So either resistance, resigned to, or running from pain. So resistance is when we resist it being here. That's when we tell ourselves, you know what? I'm just going to keep pushing through. I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to pretend it's not here. La, 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 la. Plug my ears. I don't even hear you, pain. You just resist its existence. Or maybe you're resigned to it. And resigned to pain is that yep, of course this was going to happen. This is my life. Obviously, I should have just known this was coming. This is always happens when I plan something fun, right? You just resign. It's like, whatever. I don't even care at this point. Or you run from pain. And, fight, flop, flight. I like that. I haven't heard that. Beautiful. Or running from pain, which might look like you're trying to throw all the tools you have on it so you can get rid of it as fast as possible, right? It's like, I must get away from this pain. What is, an exercise I have? What's a mindfulness tool? What's a somatic tracking? Or, what's that one stretch the PT showed me? It's like this, it's this very urgent, must get rid of it energy. Which then often leads to us feeling very inhibited. Because now your to-do list is still looming over you. The stress of not getting it done just sets in deeper, keeps you in the spiraling, probably even more. And it feels like you just can't live your life and you're kind of stuck from doing anything about it. Often we feel very stuck at this point of I've tried so much, nothing seems to work. Maybe we'll pop back and forth between these different states. And that will then eventually lead to neglected desires. Because often what happens of your desires of getting to go out and go see that show with your friends and just live life without needing to worry about pain, well, it's like it has to get neglected yet again because the pain came in. When we're stuck in shrink, so often the things that we want to do most are the things that we care about most, or even the way we desire to show up in life, right? Show up for our families, for ourselves, or at work. Those often end up being the things that we neglect the most, and not intentionally. It just feels like there's no energy, there's no space to do that. And so then for the K is we are kept in the vicious cycle of pain. So I'm going to invite you to check into your body. If you followed along, imagining yourself in the shoes, or maybe you know exactly what it's like to be in this, check in with yourself right now of what does that even feel like in your body? Notice, where does it live? Maybe it's, in your shoulders and tenseness, or in your chest or your belly. It sucks. Yeah, it's very real. It is. It really, really is. And the reason we're taking the time to feel into it and notice it, noticing it in your heart, yeah, is because when we can map it out, when we know what it feels like to be in a response, we're actually able to pick up on it a lot quicker. And so that means when this response kind of takes over us, because that's often what happens, we can then see it. We're like, oh, I know that pang in my heart. I know what's here. Or I know that tension in my belly. Let me check in, right? It becomes almost a prompt to check in with ourselves. And so you can even use just being in this shrink response as the prompt to notice and check in with yourself, and then to shift into the power response, which we'll go into, don't worry. Yeah. And so I know that doesn't feel great to be in. So if you're still in it, go ahead and shake it off. Be like, oh, okay, shake off. I can even just imagining it running out your fingertips. I like to flick my fingers, flick energy away if you're kind of feeling stuck in anything. And so if shrink keeps us in the cycle, what do we want instead? Because the good news is we can rewrite the scenario. But first, I want to introduce a concept of meeting yourself where you are with compassion. If you only take one thing from this presentation, I know it's called Shrink to Power. I'm actually going to say, take this piece away. All right. Because without this skill of meeting yourself where you are, and it is a skill, this skill right here, had I learned this skill way earlier on, I probably would have saved myself, I don't know, years of suffering. Because when we can meet ourselves where we are with compassion, without judgment, it actually is what allows us to take the next step forward so much and in a more empowered way. So often we get so critical of where we are. And again, we just learned that that critical, that harsh inner critic is part of the shrink response. And so what I found was, and the reason I'm putting this here is right after we learned the shrink response, that some people were learning the shrink response, and then they were judging and criticizing themselves for having it. And that only will amplify the response. And the reality is we're all going to have a shrink response because we are all human. The human brain is always going to bias towards, like, left unchecked will always bias towards the negative. The cool thing is we can impact it to move into a response, but nothing has gone wrong if you have a shrink response. In fact, that's probably why you're here. That's me too. You're not alone. I still have that response sometimes. And then we get to check it and move out of it. That is the goal. So part of meeting yourself where you are might be exactly in that shrink response. Right? Someone mentioned, they get resigned or wanting to push past. And it's just meeting yourself of like, right now I'm resigned. Right now I want to push past without any judgment, without making it mean anything. It's not wrong. Neither of those are wrong. And so we can even meet ourselves in judgment of our response. This is my favorite way to play with meeting yourself where you are, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but it can be hard to meet yourself with compassion. And so I love to meet myself, not in compassion with myself, of like, right now, here I am being really harsh on myself and not being able to be compassionate with myself. And that's where you are right now. Or right now, I'm really judging myself quite heavily, right? And so you always get to meet yourself exactly where you are, and often that will naturally bring in the compassion piece. You know you've done this when you can kind of see where you are in this third-party observer. It's almost like you're witnessing what's happening on a movie screen versus being like completely enveloped in it. And again, this is so important because without this piece, we can use a lot of tools that we've learned, but we use them from this place of like still fighting or beating ourselves up. We're like almost using them from the shrink response. And so they'll often just jam up in the system. So sometimes if you feel like you've been trying certain things and it just hasn't been working, or maybe other people are like, oh, this works great. And you're like, why is this not working for me? Sometimes has nothing to do with the tool itself. It's like you want this precursor to it of being able to meet yourself where you are. So such an important piece. And the other example I give for this is if you are lost somewhere, you have to first know where you are in order to then start moving towards your destination, right? You don't want to just start like aimlessly like running in all these different directions when you have no idea which way to go. You have to know where you are first. All right. So as you've met yourself where you are with compassion, you then get to move into the power response. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put that same scenario that that person was in. And we're going to switch it to like, what could that look like if they instead shifted into the power response? So same scenario, they're looking forward to dinner, to-do list is looming though, and that pain sets in. Those neural pathways that want to go into spiraling start to fire, but despite the tough week, they end up having a completely different response that unfolds. And it looks something like this. First, there's the pause of just a noticing. The pain is here. Then there's an opening. You take the time to open to what is happening, to fully assess the situation. I love to do this by actually imagining myself floating, like almost like backing up away from my body. So it's like I'm getting a better bird's eye view of like what is actually happening here. Like what are all the moving pieces? So it's just giving myself that ability to like witness what is going on really in this situation, even if it's just with myself. And when you can really open and have this spaciousness, it allows you to bring in this wisdom and wonderment. This wonderment and curiosity, it shifts your state. It allows you to tune into the wisdom to guide you through this moment with full trust and wonderment about what your body needs. You know, it might be about discovering why the pain is present, or maybe it needs something to support it, or maybe there's an emotion that needs to be expressed, right? Pain can manifest from so many different things. We really don't know what the physical manifestation is until we take the time to pause, check in with our own wisdoms, and really get curious about it. So rather than being one of those 3 R's, which creates that wall and the tension between ourselves and our body, right? Because we're like pushing away from it or we're trying to get rid of our pain. The wonderment allows us to like be curious, to lean in and to hear what our body has to say. Like we're about to hear a secret from a good friend. It's like, ooh, I really want to know like what's here. This allows you to feel empowered as you're able to fully step into your personal power and gain a sense of freedom and spaciousness and relief as you are tuning into what your body is trying to communicate rather than letting the pain shrink or letting it take over. Because of this, you then move into a resilient adaptability where you are able to stay deeply in touch with your values, your desires, and your goals, while also being adaptable, having that like flexibility to move with the ebbs and flows of our bodies and of life. And as you move through this power process, you get to respond to what your body needs from a place of respect and compassion, not from a place of needing to fix it or fearing our bodies. It's a place that allows you to feel grounded and intentional. And often when you move through this power response, you end up just feeling proud. And I invite you to be with yourself and your body in this way. And this really allows your whole system to feel regulated and at peace. The pain dissipates. You're ready to continue your day in whatever feels like the right next step for you, because it really is going to vary, right? Depending on who you are, what's going on with your pain, you know, it can vary on so many levels. There's never any one right thing. It's about tuning in and what does our body need in this moment while taking into account what's going on in life. I know a response like this can sound a little dreamy, right? And I'm here to tell you it is so possible. Not only am I living proof of it, so are the hundreds of clients I have worked with. And we don't need this process, perfect to go through it, as we've talked about. But the intention of shifting, of breaking that cycle, of noticing when you are in shrink and instead shifting towards power, to happen faster than you ever believed possible. Because our bodies just really cannot heal, as I said before, when you see them as something to be feared or fixed. Because again, remember, that keeps us in that threat response. And the thing is that ultimately pain is a part of you. It's a part of our bodies. And seeing pain as a part of you does not mean it gets to run the show, though, or gets the last say. Like a toddler is a part of the family, it does not mean the toddler makes the executive decisions. The toddler is not the one deciding which house to purchase or job to go to, but they get a seat at table. They get to have a say. They get to be listened to and treated with like respect and dignity. And so what I wanted to offer is some really tangible ways to move into power. And this is just breaking it down even further into two simple steps. Okay. And these alone can really be enough to jumpstart the healing journey and completely shift the trajectory of how you're approaching your pain. And the biggest mistake I see people make with this is actually just underestimating how freaking much this helps. Some people are like, this seems too easy or too good to be true. And don't get me wrong, some of us, myself included, needed more than just these two steps. It might not be where your journey is just magically ending, but writing this off as too simple would be like not taking the first bite of food because it's not enough to fill you up. These steps are absolutely crucial to healing and reclaiming your life back from chronic pain. And even if you're someone who needs more, these steps are a foundation that when put in place gives you such a solid foundation to move off of and allow you to live your life with so much more ease and open your life back up again. So to move into power, we've talked about this already. You get to first pause, right? That P, and meet yourself where you are. As a mentor recently said to me, it's no longer about survival of the fittest. We've really shifted into a new age. It's about survival of the awarest. To first shift anything, we must notice where we are, meet ourselves there without needing to change it or judge it or resist it first. This might be meeting yourself in anger, in grief, in frustration, in self-judgment, and just a lot of pain, right? Just meeting yourself there. And then going to shift into a wonder-driven mind, right? So that's that W. I'm just going to go into more detail about that, what that wonderment piece will look like. So what is a wonder-driven mind? It's an essential place to approach this work from. It's characterized by a state of curiosity and awe and just this genuine desire to explore and understand the world and ourselves. It refers to a mindset that really embraces wonder and actively seeks out new experiences, knowledge, and perspectives. The wonder-driven mind is open to possibility, it asks questions, it finds joy in the process of discovery, and it holds a sense of awe and appreciation for the wonders of the universe and our own bodies. When we shift physiology and neurology for the better, there's actually scientific research on the emotion of awe that shows that awe releases signals in our body that tell us we are safe. And if you remember, what is the biggest thing that creates that nervous system sensitization? It's the threat response, right? This is a way to physiologically drive the safety signals, is coming into awe. And what I love about awe and wonderment is that unlike trying to shift into an emotion, like a positive emotion, which is real inauthentic at times, I'm sure we've all been in that state where someone's like, think positive, and you're like, screw you, right? And like nothing, or it's like, I'm going to force myself to feel grateful, and it just feels so misaligned. You know that you are forcing it, It does not feel good in your body, right? It's just sometimes those positive emotions aren't accessible. The cool thing is awe is accessible from any emotion, even pain. Way easier to be like, I'm in absolute awe that my body can produce such real physical pain in the complete absence of anything physical happening. Then I'm so grateful for my body, right? Like sometimes it's just easier to have that awe than gratitude. At least that was for myself. I always struggled with gratitude when I was not feeling good. And so the reason it's so crucial is because when we activate that shrink response, that harsh inner critic, that judgment, that's spiraling, right? It just keeps us in that vicious cycle. But when we can access that wonderment, then we can open to self-reflection. That pause becomes easier. The whole power response feels so much more accessible. A wonder-driven mind is the difference between being like, I'm feeling powerful against my pain. Wow, I'm such a weak person. I'm never going to be able to do this. My dad was right. I really need to suck it up. Says, I'm feeling powerless against my pain. Wow, that's really fascinating that this knee pain is creating this really big, intense emotional sensation. I wonder what that's about. Notice the difference, right? You weren't really trying to bring yourself into like some positive mind state. It was just curiosity at its core. Sometimes my wonder-driven mind might look like, wow, isn't it fascinating that opening my dishwasher to see that my husband has loaded it, which in a way that seems like the most asinine possible way to put in objects into a dishwasher, can create this intense rage sensation that's making me want to scream and pull my hair out. Dang, that's amazing that the body can switch from being so chill to raging in 2 seconds by looking at some inanimate objects. It is pretty fascinating, right? You can bring this awe of like, wow, it's crazy what the body is capable of. So no matter what your go-to mindfulness or mind-body tools are, I guarantee that you can pull in these 2 steps as you engage in them, right? The pause and meeting yourself where you are and shifting into a wonder-driven mind, because these will really help release the ball and chain of pain and allow you to get back to living a life that feels full out. So I know that today we have talked about a lot. We've talked about the vicious cycle of pain. We've talked about the shrink to the power response. Then we just broke it down into hopefully 2 easy action steps to remember, so you weren't having to remember all those different acronyms. And so the suggested action step for you is to just start by noticing your reactions to your pain. Notice, what is my pain response? To day-to-day events. It doesn't even have to be just a pain, and see where you can shift them into a wonder-driven mind. And just notice what opens up when you do that. And so with that, I know we're right on time. Look at that. That is a first for me. But I'm happy to stay a little bit to answer any questions. And these are some, if you want to, again, ask me anything afterwards, then you can go visit me at my website. There's a contact form on there. You can follow me on Instagram, or I also have my Unweaving Chronic Pain podcast. And yes, humor is fantastic, Gail. That is an amazing mechanism to use. If there's any other questions that I missed, please feel free to pop them in the chat.
There was one back here, Andrea. I just want to say, like, I have never heard it kind of said in this particular way. Like, so many of our webinars point towards this, but never in this way. Like the idea of awe and wonder, it just feels like such a like accessible to every human, and this kind of wide open, a wider scope when you feel like you're in that tunnel of pain.
Yes.
I really like the way the 2 simple steps. Yeah, so I'm gonna ask an interesting question. Is there wonder driven mind correlated with self-compassion and moving towards awe?
Yeah. So I'll actually, so the wonder driven mind and awe, I feel like can be used fairly interchangeably if you want to think of them the same. And I'll even explain a little bit more about that in a second. I find that when you can access that awe or the wonder driven mind, it almost, it's like a bridge to self-compassion. It's almost like the self-compassion floods in without you needing to try. It's so much easier to access, versus trying to access self-compassion can be, I think we all know, can be really hard sometimes. Whereas if you approach from a different kind of angle and come at it from an awe, I find you just open sometimes right away to self-compassion, and sometimes it just opens up that opportunity for it to come in. And does that answer the question, hopefully?
We'll check in with
Is
Ina.
that?
Yeah.
And while Ina, feel free to write in there. But so I had developed the concept of the wonder-driven mind. And then, man, it's probably just like a couple weeks later after I had, I really wanted to call it something. I got someone asked to be on my podcast. Michael Amster and Jake Eagle. They have a book that is called The Power of Awe. And I have a podcast I have them on my podcast. I interview both of them separately. And they bring in, I didn't know the research, like honestly, I just knew the wonder driven mind worked, but I didn't have any research on it. And I realized as I was reading this book, I was like, oh my gosh, awe, wonder driven mind. It's like, to me, it's the same thing. And they have all this research on the power of awe. And so I highly recommend checking out their work. It's a beautiful book that they have, The Power of Awe. You can check out those podcasts, especially the one with Michael Amster. He really kind of walks you through the awe process that they developed. I mean, you'll recognize a lot of similarities, but it was really cool to like basically have them come in and back up what I was doing with research without, me realizing it. But their book's really, really good. It's a really easy read too. And I feel like they make it super accessible.
David says, I'm in awe we're able to have you here. Well, there's the start.
I love it.
I also just want to say, Andrea, I wonder if you want to stop your share of your screen just for a sec. Here we go. About the shrink process and how like that describes absolutely, that response to pain that we go into that puts us in this like contracted state. Like that was well done with that. I like acronyms too. It was like spot on.
It's helpful.
And then those two steps that can expand you out of that. And I think everybody here, if you live, obviously living with pain is experiencing that just natural shrink response. And often what I find is we don't realize sometimes that we even have a choice around that.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe we'll just take one more question because we're after 7. Heidi's wondering, enjoyed this session, still curious about physical reasons for pain. Oh, this might be something more for Mark. Has there been research on dopamine levels in the brain and pain perception? I'm not sure if either of you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look that up, to be honest with you. That's not something I've got at my fingertips. Andrea, I don't know if you've got any answer to that one.
I'm trying to think of direct research. I know in like a lot of times you see in people who are kind of in a state of more apathy, I think, I mean, that's like dopamine is really depleted. And that's often, from, and I know this is something that I'm actively working on or really had to, and it's a lot of my clients is social media use and internet use and scrolling or engaging in certain activities can really lead that state.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I'll be, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if patients in chronic pain have suppressed levels of dopamine. I'm just not sure what the research around that is. You know, that's, yeah, without having to look that up and seeing if there's, you know, been any research into it. I mean, I think some of the medications that we prescribe to try and increase some of the dopamine levels, you know, as part of the, you know, the pain, sort of improving your pain. I know some of the SNRIs can do that as well. So yeah.
You
But
know what?
yeah,
I would probably put money on it that there's a connection between awe and dopamine.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would put money on that.
Hmm.
I love that. I had a suggestion, more discussion around this awe component. Okay, you've opened up a whole world here that I'm gonna look into that
I,
book, and you know,
I'll
as
connect you with Michael, with Dr. Amster. He might be
sorry,
good. I said I can connect you with Dr. Amster,
yeah,
who
it'd
wrote
be
the
great.
book. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that would be really
I mean, I can't
interesting.
promise anything, but he might be a great one to come on here if he's
Absolutely.
willing. Yeah.
As an antidote to the pain response. Yeah, yeah.
That sounds like a great
Well,
idea. I'll leave that with Madeline to connect.
yeah. Andrea, I really want to thank you for this, for your amazing presentation, as always, and just in your, you know, the way that you describe things. I just find that it opens up just another way of looking at things that that just makes it just makes a lot of sense to me.
Hmm.
So thanks, and yeah, for I think I'll send out the recording, and it's got Dr. Moore's contact and website on
Mhm.
it to
Hmm.
look up some of her amazing work. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks,
thanks to
Andrea. It's
everyone
great to have you back.
here tonight.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right,
All
Right. Good
right.
night.
everyone. Good night.
Okay. Good
Night.
night.
Bye.